she was directly affected by that recent massacre they had of Muslims versus Christians, and that according to her, she actually lost 9 family members in that ordeal. I have a number of Nigerian friends, and they've never complained to me about being the witnesses of any extraordinary violence. But that said, I still wouldn't particularly recommend anybody going over there for any type of extended duration. Any American going over there. But Ghana is different. Countries like Ghana is different. The ones you don't see in the news. Because this place is really peaceful. In fact, it's so peaceful, relatively speaking, that sometimes I even recommend some of my American friends and family members to come over here just so that they could see how it is to live amongst Black people who, aren't predispositioned towards violence.
Today, we have an incredible story to share with you. We are sitting down with an American expat who traded in the hustle and bustle of the United States for the vibrant life here in Africa. From cultural experiences to life-changing experiences, you will hear firsthand why he prefers to live in Africa and why he may never look back. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired by this amazing journey. Let us dive in. So what really motivated you to move from the United States to Africa, of all places?
In terms of what brought me to Africa, one of the things is that I wanted a better understanding of the ancestral background of my people, and also my family in particular. My grandmom's, before she passed away, told me that the family came from one of 3 brothers who was captured in Africa and brought to the United States as a slave. I would presume sometime around the 18th century or 17th century. And the African American community is in such a state that I really wanted a more holistic understanding of how things became as they are. But that said, I have yet to do a DNA test or anything like that. So there's a number of countries that my family could have possibly came from, primarily besides Ghana. As far as what keeps me here, despite all the poverty, I've become disillusioned with American society to such an extent that I wanted to come out of it. So even when times are bad here in Ghana, it's that conviction or that faith, if you will, that keeps me going. For example, even when things are going good, I know that I will be more comfortable in the United States than I am here in Africa. But again, it's that belief system, so to speak, that keeps me going. But that said, every day I have to grapple, or practically every day, I have to grapple with the desire of returning to the United States.
What are the biggest cultural differences you have experienced between the United States and Africa?
In terms of the biggest cultural differences between the US and Africa, like there's so many, I don't even really know where to start. But one thing I will say about Ghana in particular is that it's a lot more peaceful than the United States. In fact, even though I grew up in the States, sometimes some of the things I read on the news in terms of what people are doing to each other and even their loved ones is really surprising or shocking. Africa is also a lot more communal than the United States, but it isn't like that, Harambe Kumbaya type shit that people be imagining in other parts of the world. For instance, I once lived in a particular village, and let me say that the way people treated some of the elders up there, it wasn't like, more simply put, humane, so to speak.
So how has living in Africa impacted your quality of life and overall happiness?
Health-wise, I think that living in Africa has helped my quality of life. For instance, there are some people in the States who I grew up with who are now suffering from diabetes or obesity or other such diseases, which I believe the only reason I personally was able to avoid them is because I'm in an environment where overeating and eating the wrong foods and stuff like that is a lot more difficult than it would be stateside. But in terms of my overall happiness, let me just say that living in Ghana or in Africa could be very depressing from an economic standpoint. In fact, most of the people I met, most of the foreigners or Americans I met who came over here with the intention of staying long term, ultimately gave up for that very reason, because it could be extremely difficult to make money here.
How do you find the safety and security in Africa?
In terms of whether or not Africa is a safe place to stay as compared to the United States, I think it has a lot to do to what particular locality you're referring to. My general rule when it comes to understanding or foretelling which places are safer than others is that if you don't see the area in the news, that probably means that is safe, since the news doesn't tend to harp on the positive things, especially when it comes to the motherland. So for instance, Nigeria, even though it's the most populous country in West Africa, is known to have some serious internal issues. For instance, a friend I have on Facebook, she was directly affected by that recent massacre they had of Muslims versus Christians, and that according to her, she actually lost 9 family members in that ordeal. I have a number of Nigerian friends, and they've never complained to me about being the witnesses of any extraordinary violence. But that said, I still wouldn't particularly recommend anybody going over there for any type of extended duration. Any American going over there. But Ghana is different. Countries like Ghana is different. The ones you don't see in the news. Because this place is really peaceful. In fact, it's so peaceful, relatively speaking, that sometimes I even recommend some of my American friends and family members to come over here just so that they could see how it is to live amongst Black people who, aren't predispositioned towards violence.
What advice would you give other Americans considering a move to Africa?
The advice I would give to other Americans who are considering moving to Ghana is, despite how you may or may not feel about the United States, to register with the embassy, maintain contact and also keep your passport and those types of things intact. Moreover, it could be particularly advantageous if you secure a job in the motherland before you come over. Because if you get a job specifically as a foreigner, and moreover as a Westerner, like an American, the pay would be a lot more lucrative than it would be otherwise.